for a long time too. It's like, well, you don't get together in a damn mob, because all that does is allow you to be as horrible as you could possibly imagine and suffer from none of the consequences. That's a bad idea. So how about we don't do that? Well, there's a deep idea in the West too. It's like, pick up your damn suffering and bear it and try to be a good person so you don't make it worse. Well, that's a truth.
Dr. Jordan Bert Peterson, a man who have helped people long before he even became famous. Well, we could say it is because helping people is his job, and that doesn't mean he actually cares for those people. It is not my intention to pick sides, but clearly, by the tone of my words, I side with Dr. Peterson. I tried, but I can't hide it. This man has helped me through the hardest times of my life so far, and I just don't understand the hate he's receiving.
Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson himself and his movement and some generally concerning and hypocritical elements of it. And to start with, it's really important to understand that Peterson denies being a right-winger, even though he constantly denounces collectivism, egalitarianism, political correctness, identity politics, feminism, all of which are typically associated with leftism. He's a big proponent of right-wing and conservative ideals like hierarchies,
and it's not a very good example. It's hypocritical to some degree. He was preaching about self-reliance, okay, and being a Stoic, all the while he was addicted to a drug. That is not exactly great, okay? That's kind of the opposite of being Stoic, and it's pretty hypocritical, right? If you're telling people, all right, you shouldn't depend on external influences, and you should, essentially espouse the Stoic philosophy of everything of value coming from within you, yet you are addicted to a drug and you're not telling people about that.
Just a short overview to those who don't know who Dr. Peterson is. Jordan Peterson is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto and a practitioner of clinical psychology. He has written a few notable books, including Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, and 12 Rules for Life, just to name some. He delivers lessons not just in classrooms, but also online, in his YouTube channel. He is not timid on voicing out his social and political views in his lectures around thousands of people. And that's probably where all the hate is coming from. You see, we are quite divided, and that applies also to other countries. In Canada, arguably, Dr. Peterson's most famous, or for others' opinion, infamous case was his debate against Bill C-16 back in 2017.
Of testimony, because you don't know if you're dealing with a biased sample. And that's a big problem with the public consultation process that underlies this bill. And you can not appreciate that if you'd like, but it's standard practice in any polling institution or any body that's attempting to extract a genuine opinion out of a so-called community of people. And if that isn't followed, then you can't tell if the information that you're receiving is biased. And this, with regards to your first point,
Bill C-16 is now a law that amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. In a dumbed-down nutshell, it means that if you exhibit any discriminatory actions and speech, you go to jail. That makes sense. You do bad stuff, you spend time in prison. So why did Dr. Peterson go against it? Well, once you go through every nook and cranny of the word discrimination, or at least how it is used in Bill C-16, if you refuse to use or maybe even acknowledge how people in the LGBTQ community would want to be addressed as, that would be considered as discrimination. I am pertaining to the more extensive gender pronouns that are preferred by the LGBTQ community. Dr. Peterson fears that things would go out of hand once the government tells us what we can and cannot say. It is called compelled speech, or to force or oblige someone to say or not say something, whether that be an opinion or fact. According to encyclopedia.com, the First Amendment mandates that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, implies a stricture against compelling or coercing persons to engage in speech they do not wish to make, either because they disagree with the speech or because they wish to remain silent. If that's the case, then how did Bill C-16 become a law? It is because people don't actually go to jail for using wrong gender pronouns. As the director of the Asper Center for Constitutional Rights at the University of Toronto says, it is absurd to think that people could be jailed for misusing a pronoun once. Now, I don't understand the technicalities of the law and Dr. Peterson's tweet, but from my basic research on this topic, misusing pronouns isn't punishable by law, given that it isn't intended to discriminate or inflict any form of harassment to other people. That sounds fine, for me at least. That's why they kept on saying using the wrong gender pronoun, misusing pronoun once, because it is still required of you to accept, learn, and try to use those words correctly. That's where Dr. Peterson's argument lies. He doesn't care what people want other people to call them. But when the government enforces that, it opens a whole lot of other problems.
Bill C-16 purported to do nothing but extend human rights provisions to an excluded group, let's say, to the transgender and non-gender binary types, and that was the federal legislation. It also made it a hate crime to discriminate or harass, essentially. So now then the question is, well, what exactly do you mean by discriminate or harass? And why exactly is that a hate crime under the criminal code? Well, there was an answer to that. The answer was, well, this bill will be interpreted in light of the policies generated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, very large set of policies. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is a radically leftist organization. I think it's the most dangerous organization in Canada, although you could debate that. And they set all sorts of policies about how this legislation was going to be interpreted, and the federal government linked to their website to state that Bill C-16 would be interpreted in light of those guidelines. So I went and read all the policies. Well, one of the policies was that if you didn't use the preferred pronouns of a given group, that you could be charged essentially with a hate crime.
Yes, I am defending Dr. Peterson, if it's still not obvious. There are also a lot of things that people disagree with Dr. Peterson. But for me, it just shows that Dr. Peterson is indeed human. He has his own beliefs, his own quirks, he makes mistakes, and that makes him real and relatable. I have been jumping from one motivational speaker to another for a long time, but I stopped when I found out about Dr. Peterson. And he's not even a motivational speaker by profession. He seems more real than anyone speaking in front of a lot of people today. He doesn't enforce anything, he's open to conversations, and most of all,
I'm actually on their side. I'm really happy that they're not wasting their lives. I'm really sad to see that people are disenchanted and nihilistic and depressed and anxious and aimless and perverse and vengeful and all of those things. It's terrible. And then to see people question whether that's necessary and then to start to rise out of it. It's like, it's so fun. Like last night I was after my talk, it's overwhelming. I don't usually think about these things, but I was after my talk last night, and so all these people line up, and you know, they have their 15 seconds with me, and they're kind of tentative. They're excited and attentive when they come up to talk to me, and then they have, you know, 15 seconds of time to tell me something. I'm really listening to them, and they're hesitant about whether or not to share the good news about their life, you know, and I think it's often because when people share good news about their life, people don't necessarily respond positively. You know, they don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. Yeah. It's just unbelievable. And so they'll tell me something good, and I think, oh, that's so good. You know, somebody says, oh, I'm getting along way better with my father. I haven't seen him for 10 years, and now we get along. It's like, God, great. Yeah. And then the power of that, you can't overstate the power of that for individuals to get their life together. The individual is an unbelievably powerful force, and every single person who gets their act together a little bit has the capacity to spread that around them. It's a chain reaction, and so it's a lovely thing to see.
That's fantastic.